Hello, welcome again to Business Immigration Online. This presentation is on the O&P visas, the visas for artists, athletes, and other people with extraordinary and unusual skills. Who are the beneficiaries of O&P visas typically? Of course, artists of all stripes from almost all disciplines of the art can take advantage of the O&P visas. Movies and TV personnel, athletes, scientists, educator, business people, all of whom must be of certain notoriety or a certain degree of achievement. What they all have in common, they're all the beneficiaries, with limited exception to those visas within these categories that are for support personnel, must be of some stature in their respective fields. You cannot be literally a no one and try to take advantage of that visa. You have to be able to establish that you meet certain criteria, regardless of which of O1, O1A, O1B, P1, P2, P3. You have to show certain degree of achievement in order to be considered eligible for this type of visas. You must be coming to do what is your specialty. You cannot come to the United States seeking to do something else because you have some special skill in another field. That doesn't work. You have to show, basically, the petitioner and the beneficiary must show that there is some potential that the foreign national's activity here will contribute to the U.S. economy, to the U.S. society, welfare of the United States, and its arts and culture. Like all visas, we should mention here, are looked at by the legislator and by USCIS as instruments to benefit the United States. The artists or the beneficiary of other work visas are less of a concern for the agencies. The view is from the point of view of the U.S. employer, of the U.S. Society as a whole. You need to remember that when you deal with the visas, it makes understanding certain provisions of the law much more readily available. What O&P are not for? A lot of people think that this is a visa for freelancers. No, it's not. There is no freelancer visa in the United States. As we saw, most visas must have a petitioner, employer, in this particular case, agent as well. And those few that allow for self-petition limit what the person is allowed to do to managing the business on which they claim they're coming to manage, in the case of an E1 or E2. You can't come to the United States on O&P visa because you're going to be great. Even if you have great potential, if you haven't done anything yet or anything of consequence, you cannot take advantage of these visas because you have to have a record that is well documented in order to pass muster with USCIS on these types of visas. So I know many people know that they are the next big thing, but until they are the big thing, they cannot really take advantage of those visas. Foreign nationals, again, who wish to pursue fields that are not their fields of extraordinary ability, might find it very difficult to impossible to get the visa. And it was very strict, just to let you know. In the past, if someone was an athlete, they could not come to the United States at the end of their professional career as athletes in order to become trainer, which, you know, it's kind of like a natural progression of an athlete's job. It doesn't, you can't keep on competing until you are very, very old. So at one point people retire from active sport and start coaching or broadcasting or whatever it is. But USCIS held the position that that is not the same field of endeavor of the beneficiary. There has been a very important decision recently that allowed for a judo or martial art competitor who were reaching the end of his career the Administrative Appeal Office recognized that moving into training is remaining within the field. So that's an important movement on the part of the agency. But in more remote situation, that's not going to work. You cannot come to the US because you have extraordinary abilities in one thing and coming here to do a different thing. You have extraordinary ability in acting and you're coming here to open a restaurant. That's not going to go. Also the visa ONP is not intended for foreign national, gifted as they may be, to come here and audition and compete with the U.S. Actors and performers and athletes. That's not the purpose of the visa. Again, the U.S. has no interest to allow for this competition. The purpose is to bring people of achievement with high potential to contribute to the United States. Now, agent as petitioner unique to these type of visas, because traditionally artists and many performer and athletes used to be self-employed or are self-employed. As such, being in a relationship that are strict employment like we saw in the L1 or H1B context or even the E context would not generally work. Sometimes agents have, they come here for a tour, for example. They have numerous occasions with numerous venues, with numerous location where there are different employers. If they had to have a petition approved by all of them, first of all, they might not make any money on the tour. The time consumption of that thing would be enormous, and it's just not a practical way to do it. Therefore, agents are very helpful in this case. Now, an agent for these purposes is basically a person who serves as, in a very basic sense, as an address for USCIS to serve documents. And in certain situations, the agent may also be a professional agent, but they don't have to be. And that they don't even have to be from the same field. It's maybe very good when you have an agent, when an artist have an agent in the field, they can actually help their career. But an agent can be someone who's really just that, just the address, while the artists take care of their own career. This is completely possible, but the person who is an agent does have some responsibilities, obviously, to USCIS. They sign the petition, they disclose information, and they must make sure that there is compliance with what is said in the petition that they signed. Agent might represent multiple employers, might represent the artist with multiple venues. It can even represent a foreign employer. A U.S. agent to represent a foreign employer, so then doesn't necessarily need to be a U.S. employer that wants to employ the foreign national. Now, there are situations where there is where the person's offered employment. For example, an actor is offered to work in a theater and both perform and teach acting to their young actors. If that is a full-time thing, the theater may apply as an employer, and then they don't need all the other stuff, and they don't serve as agent. More common is a situation where an artist, for example, would work for that theater for 50% of the time, and for the rest of the time will engage in other performances or other things related to their field. In that case, the theater can serve both as an employer and an agent. Employer for the portion of the work that the person is doing with them, and an agent with respect to the actor's performance with other venues and other employers. That is a fairly common arrangement, completely acceptable without too big of a deal. Agents, unlike employers, must show itinerary. If they say we are representing the person who's coming to do so and so in such and such many venues, they have to provide an exact itinerary that shows where the person is going to perform, how many shows for how long. This is, among other things, determines how long the visa is going to be issued for. So the itinerary has to be well thought of. If there are deal memos for the performances or the tour that should be included, and at least a summary of the terms of the relationship between the agent and the foreign national, and with the venues when those exist. These are important and necessary for USCIS in order to approve the petition. Some points. ONP visa require petition with USCIS. Unlike the e-visa that we saw, and indeed like the L1 and H1B, a petition is required. Before a person can get the visa, USCIS must prove that they do meet the requirements. The duration of the visa is the length of the employment or the itinerary. This is why it's important to make sure the itinerary is provided, and no more than 3 years initially. Extensions that revolve around the same project or engagement can be no longer than 1 year. If it's a new engagement, new tour, new something of that sort, it can be again 3 years. But extension in the United States would be in 1 year increment. So there might be an advantage in going abroad and getting the visa over there. In terms of non-immigrant intent and foreign residence, O1 does not require to maintain a home abroad, but O2 and all the P category do require to do that. Therefore, it's important to make sure that if a person is not coming here, abandoning everything they have overseas, if they only come here for a short period of time, even if they believe that they have a lot of potential, it's not necessarily enough. Consultation requirement. ONP, uniquely from other visas that we see, requires consultation with peer groups and labor unions, depending on the subcategory and exactly what is in any particular field. This, in a way, is a compromise between defense of the labor market in the U.S. and the need and desire of Congress to make sure that important idea, very significant advancements or things of really extraordinary nature will be brought to the U.S. And being able to perform here. That's why this requirement came to be. Obviously, there is no LCA in the ONP category, and this consultation can be seen as somewhat of a replacement. The consultation is waived when there is no organization in a field. There are fields of arts that are developing, like multimedia and other, or sometimes culinary art, specifics within that. They don't have an appropriate peer group or union. In that situation, if you can show that, then a person does not need to provide a consultation. Sometimes there is an urgent need to get the visa, and in that situation, USCIS may waive the requirement. Also, if the organization that was requested to give the opinion did not respond in a reasonable time, USCIS may proceed without it. Otherwise, an opinion is required. The opinion from the advisory opinion that is given by the organization or union is advisory, it's not binding. Oftentimes, especially from union, the response is no, we don't think this person has extraordinary ability. In many situations, the response is just like that, very short and terse, and does not provide any reasoning. This is violation of the regulation. In order to give a negative opinion, or if an organization or union give a negative opinion, in order for it to stand, it has to be reasoned and explained with sufficient degree of specificity to allow someone to understand what exactly they are objecting to, and not that this is just a blanket objection because the person is foreign national. So that's important, and the consultation, doesn't matter if it's good or bad, must be included with the petition. you cannot, no one can decide, okay, I'm going to hide it. You are able to look for opinions from other agencies or other organizations as well, but I'm of the opinion that if whichever opinions were requested should be included. I think that's the way to go, and it's the most effective way to convince USCIS that maybe there are some disagreement, but still a person is of extraordinary abilities.